Welcome to the Thornton Review.
The show designed with you in mind. If it's important to you, it's important to us.
Kevin Gaffney is a candidate for Florida's 1st Congressional District. Kevin received his bachelor's degree in political science from Stetson University and his master's degree in public administration from Illinois Institute of Technology. Kevin has several years of federal government experience, including working for the U.S. Attorney's Office Department of Justice Criminal Unit in Chicago, Illinois, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission Division of Enforcement in Washington, D.C., and for the Department of Veterans Affairs Office of General Counsel in Illinois. He served in the areas of criminal investigation, Freedom of Information Act, management analyst, and administrative law. Kevin has been active and supportive in the Republican Party, both in Illinois and Florida. He previously served in the GOP, worked on campaigns, and earlier ran for office. He describes himself as a Reagan Republican and fiscal and social conservative. Kevin has also several years of teaching experience as an adjunct professor at Judson University in Illinois and at Northwest Florida State College, where he taught courses in criminology, public sector budgeting, and American government. He currently teaches American government, economics, and history at Bayou Christian School in Niceville, Florida. Kevin and his wife Jane have lived in Freeport, Florida for about 6 years. They have 5 adult children and 4 grandchildren. Kevin is a Christian, and he and his wife attended Destiny Worship Center in Freeport, Florida. Hi, I'm Pueschel Schneier, executive producer and manager of the Thornton Review. Thank you for tuning in. Our guest on today's show is Kevin Gaffney, candidate for Florida's 1st Congressional District. Kevin, it's nice to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on. And it's also a pleasure to meet you today for the first time.
Thank you, a pleasure.
Will you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Kevin Gaffney. I currently live in Freeport, Hammock Bay, and I teach at Bayou Christian School, upper school. I'm married for 36 years to my wife Jane, and I have 5 children and 4 grandchildren. And I'm a retired government, which is 21 years. I served as a public servant.
That's great. Thank you for that. So we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Kevin Gaffney, candidate for Florida's 1st Congressional District. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that. Company can install any type of fence. When you call and mention the Thornton Review, you'll receive a $100 discount on your fence. They also offer military discounts. Vinyl fence, wood fence, aluminum fence, chain link fence. If it has the word fence, Alpha Fence Company can do it. 850-586-8020. 850-586-8020. Thank you for tuning in. So we're going to continue our discussion with Kevin Gaffney. And so Kevin, I wanted to I have a list of questions. This is the interview with the candidate series, and I pretty much ask the same questions of all the candidates that come on the show. So I'm just going to go down the list, but during those questions, it's okay to get sidetracked and go down rabbit holes and talk about other issues and topics. Sure. And I know that you have a lot of very interesting things that I want to pull out of you. So
Thank you.
So what made you decide to run for Congress?
Well, I teach at a Christian school, and I feel that this generation that I teach, both in the upper school, 10th graders and seniors as well, feel a little disenchanted with government. I teach American government, and they feel that Congress particularly is not responsive. And there are a lot of issues confronting not only that generation, but seniors and the middle class and the panhandle, the military families that are not necessarily being represented fully in the way of pay and equity and those type of issues. And plus, what I hear a lot from my students are the multiple deployments that their friends and families have had to endure during the last 13 or 14 years with Afghanistan. So I do have an empathy for the generation. They're not sure with the debt that we currently have or the Social Security that it's going to be there, so the solvency issue there, and then just being able to pay for their education and get a quality education at the collegiate level. So those are all big concerns for me, as well as I'm a father of 5 children, so I've seen it personally as well. I do believe that even though the Panhandle is a very wealthy area that my candidacy seeks, if it was an open primary, we're a closed primary state, that my emphasis is not only on Republican voters, but Democrats and independents as well regarding their economic status.
So you mentioned military families.
Yes.
And I know you're passionate about Veterans Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of elaborate on that topic?
So I grew up in a military family.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was Army Air Corps World War II, and my uncle Jim, he actually served under George Patton in Italy and got the Purple Heart.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So I have a passion about teaching history, but I've also lived it with family members. We often hung around Legion halls and VFW halls, so I was around, and my grandfather was World War I. So generationally, I had 4 grandparents that I learned a lot from, living through the Great Depression and through basically 2 world wars. So I did work at the Veterans Affairs Regional Council up at Hines, VA in Illinois.
How long did you work there?
Almost 11 years. So that was my ending part of my federal service, and that was in personnel law and mainly in administrative law. So when Trump became president, we were actually given a greater authority to discipline wayward doctors or nurses or personnel at the agency, and that's pretty much what I was involved in, personnel law.
Wow, okay, that's interesting. Can you give us a little snippet of a particular case or anything?
Well, we did have, so the forms for personnel law would be EEOC and then the Merit System Protection Board. And there was one, I won't give out any names, but a particular doctor that was basically trying to practice in different states. And he had,
Without a license in those states? Or?
He had a license, but he had complaints against him. Oh. So we were trying to discipline him or even actually fire him.
Investigate the complaints?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And same thing with arbitration and mediation. We would have cases generally with discipline where the veteran care wasn't there, whether it's nursing staff or personnel staff. So my main concern was to care for those veterans that were being harmed, right? Mm-hmm. And then also when I was in Illinois, I partook in a ministry there, Wayside Cross Rescue Mission, and I met through our church a lot of veterans, mainly Vietnam vets that had drug issues or PTS issues, and much to the chagrin of my wife, I would occasionally invite them in, and became great friends with a lot of veterans and have an empathy for they come back and there's not much care that's given.
Okay, so I guess the Trump administration gave more leeway to investigate doctors who had complaints against them, and it was easier to actually get something done.
Yes, and we actually, as an office at that point in time, streamlined. We took some attorneys off of the Medicare or Medicaid benefit side, and we also pushed the emphasis toward personnel law.
Okay, so on to the next question. As a non-elected official, what has been your biggest accomplishment in District 1? What have you done for the community?
Okay, so I've been here going on 6 years. So when I retired from the federal government after 21 years, I wanted to return back to Christian education. And so I had applied to about 4 schools, and I ended up, the Lord led me to Rocky Bayou Christian School. And I didn't really know much about the Panhandle.
Is that a denomination?
It is a Christian non-denomination.
Okay.
So we have all denominations, basically.
I've heard of that school. I heard it's a really good school.
Yes,
It's
doing
been around
well.
for a long time, too.
And it's a good option. That's one of my issues. Even though the Florida Panhandle has great public schools, I think there should be options for parents to have a charter or private education if they so desire. But ended up there, and I've been investing in basically both my time with the church and also with the Christian education during that time. So haven't really got involved with many other not-for-profits at this point. Up north, I was involved with Salvation Army and other ministries as well. But a time element when you're teaching is just, it's almost all teaching for the 9 months.
Well, you had quite an extensive career in the government in Illinois and D.C. Can you tell us a little about that, about what some of the positions that you held and what you did?
So I started out, I actually had an interview in Chicago with the FBI, and I was just recently married during that time, so this is back in '89, and also had an interview offer with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago. And I decided, after input from my wife, that we didn't want to be moving every 4 or 5 years. And
that's what the FBI would have required.
yeah, and your career choices are not really an option. They pretty much would put you, I would be going in as a generalist with them, non-accounting, and I had a legal background, but going in a generalist program is a little different with the FBI. So I decided on the U.S. Attorney's Office, went through a full vetting background check, and cleared that, and then worked in the criminal unit as a criminal specialist with the U.S. Attorney's Office there. So I worked with several different agents, and I worked in bank fraud, white-collar crime, mafia cases, quite a substantial. In fact, I'm teaching criminology this J term at Rocky. But so cases that I worked on were, we indicted 2 governors. So political corruption.
Wow.
Governor Ryan and Governor Blagojevich, who was pardoned by Trump.
Yeah.
And a lot of interesting cases that were, I think, you're in a position like that.
Blagojevich, did he send pictures? Is that what he was charged with? I don't want to get too far in the rabbit hole about him, but
there was
that name.
some of that, and I think there was involvement with a maybe play for pay with regards to positions within the state.
Didn't he sell a Senate seat to somebody? Yeah, that's what it was.
Obama was a little part of that a little bit, but I think the investigation stopped short of doing anything with Obama.
Yeah, because of the name Obama, of course. So, well, your career just sounds very exciting. It just sounds like you have seen a lot and have done a lot.
Yes. So, and then after justice there, and let me make clear, because justice is under fire, and rightfully so, for the lawfare that's been going on. It's been very politicized. But the U.S. Attorney's Office and the U.S. Attorneys I served under in Chicago, we indicted based upon the crime, not the person.
Of course.
So we had a first ward investigation, wiretapped. It involved judges, it involved politicians, it involved the mafia and influencing the politicians. So we didn't necessarily look at, when the grand jury convened, they were indicting based upon crimes, not people.
That's important.
Right.
Because you can't weaponize the government against someone because you don't like their political beliefs. Exactly. Or because you want your guy to win. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that. Thank you for your service and your honesty.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then I received my MPA, Master's in Public Administration, from Illinois Kent School of Law, and many of the professors said, you need to go on and get your JD. Well, at this point, I have 4 children, and I was working because I had to leave the government.
Very busy person.
Yeah, I left the government to run for a county office there, circuit clerk in Kane County. And then we had Denny Hastert, who was Speaker of the House, and a sad ending for Denny Hastert because he was later indicted.
Oh, wow.
So you have to be very discerning as a voter as to who you're bringing out.
And to not just vote for somebody because you know their name.
Right. Exactly.
But to actually vet them, know what they're about, know what they're capable of, know what the issues are. I believe in voting on the issues, not the person.
Yes.
Listen to the person, look at their background, look at what they've done, look at what they're capable of doing and what they're passionate about getting done, and vote for that person.
Yes, I agree fully on that.
It's like with Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. I voted for the issues that I believe that he is strongly passionate about, and that he's going to secure our borders, that he's going to do something about Social Security, hopefully, I don't know, taxes, budget. Just let Trump be Trump,
So, my wife and I talked, and 2016, we agreed that he was the best candidate, and I actually got an inauguration invite.
Yeah.
So, and then 2020, obviously, voted for him all the way through. So his values are common sense values and common sense government.
Yeah,
and
absolutely they are. They make sense. They're logical.
His business background is perfect for the position. And I'm really excited about DOGE with what he's setting up to cut government, because that's a big issue of mine, and limiting and downsizing government.
Mm-hmm. I hope they do away with DEI.
Yes, DEI and CRT.
It's just ridiculous. I'm just going to throw this out there.
Sure.
When in Butler, Pennsylvania, when our president got shot, it happened to be my son's 20th birthday. Mm-hmm. It was July 13th, 2024. Our President-elect Trump, I guess, was giving a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, and somebody on a rooftop shot his ear. And it's really funny because my son had friends over for a birthday party, and they were in the backyard shooting each other with Nerf guns while our president actually got shot. Yeah. So it's just kind of a strange coincidence that it was on my son's birthday. But the women who were supposed to be the bodyguards, who were supposed to be the ones taking the bullet for the president if more shots were fired, were actually ducking for president. They were ducking.
Yes.
They were ducking for cover. They were scared to death. They were emotional wrecks.
Yeah. So the Secret Service, as we know from the investigations, really messed up. And the issue of political correctness.
Trump hires his own private people without women. Take the women out of there. They're emotional wrecks. They do not belong.
So I'm for a full revamping of the FBI as well as U.S. attorneys. Trump can come in basically and ask for the resignation of all U.S. attorneys if he so desired. And I think Bill Clinton did that. And then Secret Service as well. The Secret Service has been maligned, and I'm not talking about normally the regular agents. I'm talking about the SES, the Senior Executive Service, needs to be reformed, where we're top heavy in a bureaucracy where there's a lot of overpaid bureaucrats that are politically appointed. And that's going to be the challenge for President Trump, in that how does he in his 4 years make real reform and downsize with the entrenched bureaucracy.
I think he's going to do it this time.
Yeah.
I think the last time he wanted to be elected again, well, then of course the witch hunt, they did not let him do anything.
From day one, the impeachments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had all these obstacles. This time he has nothing to lose. He can't run again. He's going to plow forward and do everything he can for the good of this country. And I think he's actually going to do more than what he promised the last time.
Yes.
Because he didn't get a chance to get much done last time.
No. And that was the strategy of the Democrats. And loser Hillary just would not give up. And then those intelligence agencies, CIA, with their fake Russian news and dossier, all that. So he was tied up in a lot of legal matters, currently still with this judge in New York, Burchin. So we'll get through it.
Yeah, we will. So now what do you think is the biggest problem, or what do you see as the biggest problem in District 1 right now?
So I think the national issues of the economy affects, obviously, District 1. And there's overlapping issues. I think immigration is one. I think Governor DeSantis has handled the immigration issue fairly well with diverting flights and whatnot when the Biden administration was doing that. But
Oh, can I say something?
Sure.
Real quick? So I know someone. I'm the secretary of the Escambia County Republican Party, and someone in our meeting said that he works at the airport. I don't know if he's a volunteer or if he actually has a paid position at the airport, but regardless, he's at the airport all the time. He said they are flying them into Pensacola. Yeah. They are getting off the plane loads at a time, and they don't speak English, and you can tell they're just, they're homeless, illegal immigrants.
So were they caught and sent out? No. Okay, so
they're not being reported.
Their job is what I read.
Yeah.
So
here in Pensacola all the time, like it's happening all the time. It's happening a lot more than we know.
From what I understand, they were just blind flights too. We didn't know where they were going. The administration probably did.
Yeah. Well, they're probably going everywhere.
Yeah.
There's millions of people being brought in.
I am fully for deportation of. I think it's really around upper 20s or mid 20s 20 million that have come in.
That's just an incredible amount, and it's too much, and it needs to stop, and they can stop it. We just need honest people in there who care and who are going to put policy down, create policy, and make, we need laws that say it's going to stop. So I want to know what the very first thing you will do if you're elected as our congressman, but we need to take a commercial break, so we're going to come back to that. All right. The Thornton Review is a civic engagement show with a purpose to spread awareness by interviewing local elected officials, candidates, and professional leaders. This is information you won't get anywhere else. We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Kevin Gaffney, candidate for Florida's 1st Congressional District. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that. Company can install any type of fence. When you call and mention the Thornton Review, you'll receive a $100 discount on your fence. They also offer military discounts. Vinyl fence, wood fence, aluminum fence, chain link fence. If it has the word fence, Alpha Fence Company can do it. 850-586-8020. 850-586-8020. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion with Kevin. And Kevin, I'd like to know, what is your top issue? Like, what is the very first thing that you want to get done if you're elected?
Okay, so one of my passions are veterans. So I think I have a brother-in-law that's been injured, as he was a former Blue Angel pilot, actually, out of
Really?
Pensacola here.
Your brother was?
Brother-in-law.
A brother-in-law? Okay, so your wife's brother was
He's
in
getting
Blue Angels.
excellent care in both. He had excellent care in Orlando, VA, as well as now up near actually Gaffney, South Carolina. So my thought is we shouldn't have veterans traveling for care. And whether around Niceville or sort of toward the middle of District 1, I'd like to see a state-of-the-art facility for veteran care. So they're not having to travel, and it's not half care like some of the facilities are.
Right.
So, and I'm also concerned about cost for just the elderly, prescription drugs, and just trying to make it day to day, not having to choose between necessities of life and prescription drugs.
Absolutely.
So I am encouraged that President Trump has gone with no taxes on Social Security, no taxes on tips. Those proposals, I think, are going to happen in maybe two separate bills, not one big ominous bill. And also encouraged that I would like to see pensions not taxed as well. So lesser taxes, less government is a big one. And then besides veteran care is the immigration issue that I'd like to see tackled as well.
Are there more people receiving Social Security than there are paying into Social Security?
Yes. So that's the problem.
It's going to run out, right?
Yeah, the solvency is only to 2035. So Congress has really not addressed it. I think in my kickoff at American House, I actually addressed some of the proposals, and one of them, because we're living longer, the life expectancy,
expectancy.
Yeah,
Sorry.
So probably raise the full retirement age. And then also, I think we need.
So raising the retirement age helps Social Security. It helps
Yes.
preserve it some, yeah.
I'm not certain. So 3%. So my student workers, my students that work at Rocky, they pay 3% in, and then your employer is paying 3% in. So that could be tweaked on the employer side to maybe pay a higher percentage, 1% higher for Social Security. And then I would like to see for students or the younger generation that it could be privatized. So similar to what I had in the federal government, a TSP program, that they could actually make their own investment choice instead of relying on the government to put the funds in a general fund.
Well, people have that option now. There's all kinds of ways to invest your money. You can invest.
I'm talking when they're in a Social Security system, and they have no option to. It's just going into a general fund and pretty much being spent.
To opt out of Social
Yeah.
Security. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. That makes
Or
sense.
not necessarily opting out, but having part of it where they could take what they're paying in and invest it on their own and have growth to it.
That would be fair and reasonable for individual citizens of this country. I would agree with that, because knowing that Social Security is just going to, go away.
And it is a social contract. So since Franklin Roosevelt, we had massive unemployment during the 10-year Great Depression. So I think that the social contract should continue, and the same thing with Medicare and Medicaid. The question last night was brought up about at the forum with regards to Obamacare, and there are some candidates that are for taking away completely Obamacare, but they don't understand that there's a lot of people that are subsisting on subsidies for Obamacare. So I agree with tweaking it and reforming it, but not totally eliminating it.
Well, I know when Obamacare came into play, our health insurance doubled.
Yeah.
Absolutely doubled, and like yearly, I think.
Well, the aspect I don't like of it is just the reporting aspect. You have to show the IRS that you have insurance. Yeah, so.
I don't really mind that because I have insurance. My husband and I have health insurance, and we have it on our son. So I don't really mind having to show it for taxes. It is a little bit intrusive, but what I minded was that it just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
It doubled overnight. and then the next year it doubled again, and I think the next year it doubled again. So it's just out of control.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should have done that to us, because we're doing what we're supposed to do. We're going to work. We're law-abiding citizens, taxpayers, raising our son the best way we can, and we are being punished by having to pay more on our insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And then not only the insurance rates, my daughter's been going through cancer treatments, and just the cost of the prescription chemo is so high, let alone all the imaging and testing that's done. So there's got to be a better way.
Deductibles also.
Right.
Yeah.
And for a young couple, that's tough to handle. So between that and pharmaceuticals, I'm diabetic. So I take insulin before Trump offered to have it capped, actually in the midst of COVID, at $35, and then it failed, and then Biden picked it up again and took credit for it, even though Trump had initially proposed it. But I was paying $500 for 3 vials of insulin.
Wow.
So the average person can't do that.
Right.
We shouldn't have to when you're with life and death situations that you
Absolutely.
need the meds.
Yeah. So, what is your ultimate goal for District 1? Like, what would you like to see done? How do you envision the future of District 1 with you as our congressman?
So representation, like I mentioned earlier, for everyone in the district. So across party lines for all economic demographics, to help those that need a hand up. And then obviously with the military families as well. I would just like to end all the wars that have been going on, and really discern. As a congressman, I'd probably be with the first the caucus, Freedom Caucus. So that's a very conservative group, and
That would be a good caucus to be with.
Yes, and hold Speaker Johnson's
Yes.
feet to the fire, because I didn't like that 1,500-page bill that he proposed with the Democrats. So part of that is, but I think we have an insurance problem here with regards to all the hurricanes we've had, and I'm not sure the state
property
authorities,
insurance, house
including
insurance.
Jimmy and the rest that are on the state side, have not really done the job. Citizens as a not-for-profit is probably not the way to go, and we can't keep having these little insurance companies coming in, and then after a catastrophe they bail, and then people are not covered.
Oh.
So I
So I didn't
you
know
know,
that was
even
happening.
even State Farm, I have State Farm, and they're looking at their bottom line over their clients. So there's got to be a better way. Maybe the state develops a reserve fund for these catastrophic, these storms, and maybe restrict flood zone areas where residents shouldn't be built.
So I have a question regarding flooding. Have you ever heard of or done any research, or has anyone ever mentioned to you permeable material to build roads, parking lots, and sidewalks?
No, I haven't heard that. No.
So there used to be a road in Cantonment, Old Bridge Road, and when it was first paved, it was paved with permeable asphalt. I don't know if asphalt is the correct term, but it was paved with a black permeable substance where you could take a bucket of water and pour it on the street, and it would just absorb right down into the road instead of running off. And we did it. We did it a couple times because we'd have friends or family come in town and tell them that our road was permeable, and nobody believed us. So there is, and that was a long time ago. So during the last county commission election a few months ago, I was talking about Old Bridge Road. Everybody needs to go to Old Bridge Road and pour a bucket of water on it. And we need to, as we build new parking lots, roads, and sidewalks, and as we repair parking lots, roads, and sidewalks, we need to go to permeable, because I haven't done the research. I'm not an engineer, but I do have a brain. And I know that we're clear cutting the land and paving over it with houses, roads, parking lots, sidewalks, buildings, churches, schools, strip malls. clear cutting the land and paving over it. That's causing the flooding. If we had permeable asphalt for roads, parking lots, and sidewalks, and tree lines, on beside all of the roads, with a grass area, I think that would solve our flooding issue.
Yeah. A lot of it. You touched on the growth issue too. So Walton County, where I live, is just
exploded.
crazy. Freeport's one of the largest growing areas. So there has to be better
out of
planning
control
at mainly the county level, what we're doing with planning. And I agree, the structures have become better built. I spent some time when my family moved to Naples, Florida, and had a friend that lived right near the pier there, and his house survived Hurricane Donna, but
was it the only one that survived?
So these hurricanes have been devastating. The same areas hit, and the people of the state deserve to get adequate coverage, and then coverage that's not, it's increasing every year astronomically too.
Yeah.
So to keep it covered. So a lot of people are leaving the state because of that. So the state officials, I know a federal Congress can help with that, but it's mainly on the state officials to get that corrected.
Right. And it's probably more on a local level for roads or state roads would be on a state
One
level.
thing
But
that I question, because I've been here almost 6 years and we're still working on 98.
oh, really?
Highway 98.
Like redoing it?
Yeah, it's always been under construction.
Yeah.
So we've got a nice bridge down there at 331, the overpass at Santa Rosa, but I still can't figure out why the other bridge we still have to pay a toll to as residents.
That's probably never going to end. I don't know, but so what's the most important thing you'd like to change? You've probably already touched on that, but as far as changing any policy or what's going on in District 1,
Okay,
and
so,
it might even trickle down from the federal level.
So this came up last night, and I've signed a pledge for this. So term limits.
Okay.
3 terms for a House member to be 6 years, and I'm proposing just 1 6-year term for a senator. So those would be constitutional amendments.
That would be big.
Yeah, and then one of the opponents basically said that the expertise would be lost. I think not, because what would happen, you'd have a more energized voter base that, hey, we can get new faces in there, we can get energized leadership.
If there is anybody good that's willing to take the position because they really care and not for the money.
Exactly.
But it is the original, because I haven't memorized our Constitution, is the original term limits, or are the term limits that we have now, were those the original in our first American Constitution?
No, so we had, initially we had the Articles of Confederation, which was the failed government by the founders, and then we've never had term limits for Congress. So they've set out the qualifications,
Right.
and this is interesting in this race.
So you never had term limits
No, just
from the very beginning. So that's going to be hard to change.
22nd was for the presidency after FDR. So we got the term limits for the presidency, but not for Congress. Yeah, it would be. You'd have to have both houses, so 2/3 of each house would have to vote, and then 3/4 of the states would have to approve it. So that's a big haul. And then a balanced budget amendment, same thing. I'd be proposing that. But again, for District 1, I think it's the economy, keeping the prosperity. We don't have a state tax, which is great. That's an allurement. And then how to handle the growth of the panhandle. We have beach access issues that also have been discussed. Walton County is trying to restrict beach access. And I'm a firm believer in open areas too. So what I do like in Walton County, and if you drive along Route 20, you see a lot of preserved areas. And again, we have the largest. Yeah, we have the largest Air Force base in the world. So
Right.
we've got to care not only here in Pensacola for our Navy personnel, but for our Air Force personnel.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe in preservation. We need to preserve some of our original forests.
Yes.
It's very important for the animals, for the ecosystem, for everything.
One of my favorite presidents, Teddy Roosevelt. So some of the candidates, admit, they were asking, in the first forum whether they would do away with the EPA, and I am not for that at all, because you need a federal agency to oversee the states and what they're doing. And
some of it may need to be reformed, though,
Yeah.
because Flint, Michigan happened under the EPA.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we don't that.
Yeah.
I think that put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth regarding the EPA, because it's like they allowed that to they knew it was happening. They knew it.
Yeah. So,
And so
yeah, it's the
I
same
think
thing
that's why
like
the EPA has such a bad stigma.
with the FBI, and it's the same thing. They're mainly, in some cases, reactive rather than proactive. But I just think you need the oversight of the EPA for the most part, and looking. It is federalism, so the states and local authorities have a responsibility as well with what's going on with the environment. And I really like what DeSantis has done with the Everglades, and he's actually a conservationist, I do believe. But the other question that came up, should we have drilling in, I think Trump wants to name it not the Gulf of, he wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. I just heard that today. So,
The Gulf of Trump.
so whether we should have drilling in the Gulf, and I'm not too sure about that as well. There are other areas.
Florida has a good ring
Yes.
to it.
So where we should be drilling, and I'm all for energy and certain types of energy, and fossil fuels included.
Right. I am too, but I am very into the environment. I believe our environment is very important. God gave us clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, and sin is what pollutes it.
Right.
Greed. Yeah.
Greed is the big one.
So, yeah, there has to be a common ground. There has to be some sort of compromise, because we need gas, we need drilling.
Yes.
But where we do it and how we do it is important.
Right.
And I don't know anything about drilling, but engineers who do know about drilling should be able to find a way that's not going to destroy our environment or destroy our Gulf
Right.
and the ecosystem around it.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Agree.
Very important. So, what about roads and infrastructure with this growth that we have coming into Florida? Pensacola, Beulah. I'm in Escambia County, so I know a lot about our own county here. Pensacola, Beulah, and Cantonment, which are in Escambia County,
Yep.
have experienced an explosion of new construction. Houses are going up everywhere. There is no more land for sale. Maybe, but it's very expensive and you can't afford it. So our infrastructure, our electric grid, our water supply, our sewer, how are we keeping up with this growth expansion?
And that's, I think, the challenge that Walton County is having. District 1 has a part of Walton County in it. And
Yeah.
I think they're not able to really manage planning-wise down the road what we need to do. So it just seems as though what's happening is just growth, and then
Yeah.
we'll prove it, and then we'll figure out a way to pay for it.
Right.
So I'm one where we do, seniors have the tax exemption, but I think taxes are just too high. Now, what I was paying in Illinois is much higher than what I'm paying in Florida because of the tourist and sales tax. But I think that there has to be better planning on the county
at
level.
what point are we going to stop construction? It's just going up everywhere.
Right.
You can't just clear cut the entire state or the entire United States and build on it.
Well,
You can't.
Yeah, I think each county we need to look at and be at those meetings, right, where they're planning these projects and say no to it.
Right.
Freeport, because of the
Because of your
growth,
capacity.
we're having to build so many schools,
Yeah.
new schools, and that all goes to the bottom line tax.
I feel like each community, each county or city needs to have a maximum capacity.
Right.
And we need to figure out what it is. If you have to hire somebody to do a study, figure out what it is. And I know ECUA knows how many people they can handle as far as water supply and sewer. And I've visited them quite a few times. I've been on the tour of their water reclamation facility, and it's a state-of-the-art $10 million project where they purify the water, and then they do what they do with it. But they have a couple of at the end, they have room for expansion that they're not using yet. So it's just sitting there dormant now because the water reclamation holding ponds or whatever they are, where the water goes through and it gets filtered and filtered and filtered, and they have some at the end that aren't being used yet, and it's in reserve for population growth.
Right.
So at some point it will be used.
So that's good planning.
But once it's used and they don't have any more reserve past it, then what do? Like build onto it to build more reserve, or to build more as needed? At what point the community leaders have to say, we're at maximum capacity, no more construction. Our infrastructure can't handle it, our roads can't handle it, the schools can't handle it.
So your city manager or a county administrator should be leading in that regard and not caving to the business end of it and growth. And they should start saying, no, I know that's happening in Walton County, and that a lot of open spaces, and I can just see it along 20 where things are sold. So a lot of those open areas are going to go by the wayside for whatever. We have more dollar stores and more storage facilities around where I live.
I know.
And
yeah.
I love growth. I love that people are coming here. But it's going to change also the dynamic of the politics too of the state.
Growth is natural. It's
Right.
going to happen, but it's the quality of growth, and can you accommodate the growth?
Right.
And who's going to pay to accommodate the growth? Who's going to pay the impact fees for widening the roads, for building more roads, for improving the land? Because vacant land that's not improved has to have sewer, water, electric. It has to be improved. Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it falls on the tax collector. It falls on the taxpayers,
Right.
which I don't think it should. A lot of people don't think it should.
No, and you look at your tax bill, it's going up every year in all those separate categories. So
We need a master plan.
yeah.
Every community, each community needs its own master plan, and we need somebody in charge of the master plan. It needs to be voted on somehow, because of course there's going to be differences of opinions on what should be on the master plan. But each community needs a maximum capacity.
Naples ran into the same thing, growth toward the Everglades, and then you got a lot of multimillionaires right on the beach, and they've changed basically the dynamics of the old Naples I knew in the 1970s, which were some nice cottage houses, and it's just changed I think the charm of that city, and we don't want to see that in some of our cities. So.
Well, I remember it used to be against the law to build on wetlands. Like it was a federal law or state law, I don't know. And you could get fined heavily, or go to prison for building on wetlands. Well, people are building on wetlands. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it's not, I guess it's not a crime anymore. It might still be on the books, but nobody is
Enforcing it.
doing, not being enforced. I've seen it here in Escambia County. So that
is a big issue and traffic flow is a big issue.
And that will cause flooding.
Right.
Building on wetlands, it'll cause more flooding.
Right.
So, what have you done? Like, what is your most favorite part of your career?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you. I do love the federal side of it. I'm the only candidate that is a Christian educator, as well as a presence in public service as a public servant, not to elevate myself. So I went in there to actually, with the U.S. Attorney's Office, to basically do good, right? Get the bad guys and that type of thing. And then CFTC, I was with in Washington, Division of Enforcement, and then also with the VA, especially with the personnel area. So I did have a passion for all those areas. There was a Christian we used to, in the U.S. Attorney's Office, had actual Bible studies. And so there are a lot of good God-fearing people in the government that are basically following the mandate of scriptures, being salt and light. So that's one of the reasons I'm running, because I just think our view is being either marginalized. I've heard from a lot of voters that the culture shifts, and either we're not speaking up enough or being involved enough as candidates in the arena.
And as we the people.
Right.
The citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Christians are too comfortable in the church pew.
Right.
Their outlook is to each his own. I'm saved. I'm in my church pew. I'm receiving God's gifts. I'm receiving the Lord's Supper. I'm baptized. I'm worshiping. I'm hearing the gospel. I'm entrenched in the gospel. Then I go home and take care of my family, and my focus is on my family and the Lord. And that's what a lot of Christians are doing.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the entire United
Right? Go out and make disciples. Right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
be
that's
salt
what
and
they're
light.
doing. Yeah.
And we're supposed to, according to Romans, be under government. And sometimes when I explain that to my students, there's a line where if the biblical values are being violated, then there's civil disobedience.
And if our government is telling us that it is that sin that the Bible clearly says is a sin, you can do it. We're allowing you to do it, and we are going to put in our Constitution that you can murder your baby.
Right.
That something like that, like our government should not be telling us.
No. And
Because
that's been
they-
a shift, right? That's
Yeah.
been a shift the last probably 60
That's
years.
the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
That is the Antichrist. That is the government telling people, unsuspecting people, because maybe they've never heard the gospel,
Right.
that it is okay to kill your baby.
Yeah, sadly, we're not as biblically literate as we were probably 50, 60 years ago.
And it's because Christians are too comfortable in the church pew. They're like, there's a church on every corner. If they want to hear if they want to hear the gospel, they'll go hear it. It doesn't work that way. You have to tell them the gospel. You have to get out and spread the gospel.
Right.
And it's a man's job.
One-on-one.
I believe it's a man's job.
Yeah. Being spiritual leader in the home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's first and foremost.
Yeah.
Because the home is the very basic number one source of government.
Yeah.
It starts at
Yeah.
the family structure. There needs to
Right.
be a family structure, and it needs to be biblical. And then you go out into the world and share the good news. It's very important.
Exactly.
And I'm glad that you get to do that with your students.
Yes,
I'm
that's
glad that
a
you
blessing.
raised your children. They're doing fine, besides from a couple of health issues. Or he had a health issue. I'm really sorry to hear about that, about the health issue. But
She's doing better. She was we were over a planned vacation, and she's doing very well, and she's the most adorable grandchildren, as does my son. My son was Air Force as well. He served at Whiteman and then in security forces. Now he's retired from that and then working in a prison in Illinois.
we're going to have to close soon. And do you have any last statements that you would like to
Yes.
to talk about? And anything that you would like the voters to know about you or your issues?
Okay. So this was something I drafted, and basically Michael Reagan, one of my favorite presidents, is Ronald Reagan, and stated of his dad that he was a godly man. He loved God. When he decided to run for president, he didn't do it to raise himself up, to be admired, or to have others think he was great. He didn't do it out of selfish ambition or reasons or for the position. He did it out of duty. He believed God had called him to run for president. He believed God had things for him to do. So it is with myself, God's calling, and in this race. And I admit I struggled with the call. I wanted to be semi-retired and to continue teaching. But as Proverbs 3:5 and 6 tells us, God directs our steps, and we are to be obedient to the call. In politics, as well as any profession, we are called to be salt and light. I have prayed and will continue to do so for all the other candidates. I'm praying for Matt Gaetz and his life, as well as he has been struggling a little bit with that investigative report. And I believe, as Teddy Roosevelt stated, it is not the critic who counts, that person on the outside, but those who are actually in the arena. As earlier stated, this country and district has many dire issues facing it. These problems, much like the divisions and problems confronted by our past presidents, Washington, Lincoln, FDR, and Eisenhower, and Reagan, confronted with only God's help can be accomplished. We as a nation and individual citizens should strive to make government accountable, limit its influence, make it live within its means as we do daily, and above all, honor the values and traditions that make our country great. We know what those values are deep down, but for too long we have accepted the status quo, laws that harm the unborn and our children rather than protect, and we can do better, but only with God's help. Our first Republican President Abraham Lincoln ended his second inaugural address as follows, and this really hits home with regards to the veterans: with malice toward none and charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right light. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up our nation's wounds, to care for him who shall borne the battle for his widow and his orphan, and to cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and all nations. So I wouldn't be in this race unless I believed I could win. So I don't have all the political endorsements. I have an endorsement by one fine man, Colonel Ron Webb, who was a POW at the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam for several, I think 6 years.
Wow.
So I would take the endorsements of all those colonels and the average veteran over any politician any day. And I don't have the millions, but one plus God is a majority, right?
That's right.
So
Absolutely.
I believe we can win, otherwise I wouldn't be in the race. So I humbly ask for your vote, prayers, and support.
Thank you for that. And I agree with everything you said. And isn't it amazing how eloquently they used to speak and write and do their speeches
Yes.
back then? It's a lot different today, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So you could, I'll bet you have your students memorize that on quizzes.
Yes,
That would be a good thing.
they know some of Lincoln. They know through my constitutional class we just finished, the Gettysburg Address, and they actually had to memorize all the amendments. So they are well versed in the Constitution and history.
Well, thank you for that. It was a pleasure to meet you
Thank
and to
you
have a
for having me.
conversation with you, and I learned a lot about you, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the Thornton Review is on the air to provide public service awareness and intellectual infrastructure to our community. This show is made possible by Ida Gates Godly Teas LLC, Alpha Fence Company, and our guest, Kevin Gaffney, candidate for Florida's 1st Congressional District. It was great to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we want to thank you for watching this episode of the Thornton Review. Bye-bye.